Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood of Your Legacy Legal Care, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning and welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood, and our very special guest today is Gincy Heins. She's the author and creator of Before the Diagnosis, More Stories of Life and Love Before Dementia. How's that?
Perfect.
And
nice to meet you. Hello.
Yeah, well, I'm super glad to have you on the show today because we're going to talk about, we talk about dementia a lot, on the show, which is good because we find that more and more people are getting, dementia these days than normal, than before, I should say. But you have some personal experience, and we're going to be talking about caring for yourself by caring for your spouse because we have a lot of clients that run into that, fall into that. And so I appreciate you being on the show so we can get some of your firsthand experience and knowledge for our listeners. And I guess I should probably start off with the big question. Your husband had an early diagnosis of MCI. For our listeners, can you tell us what MCI is and then kind of talk a little bit about that early diagnosis?
Absolutely. It's nice to be here this morning. Thank you. I have to say what you do is such a great service because no matter how much information is out there, more is always needed on advanced planning, on this stage of life, on what happens. So you're not, even if you're caught by surprise, you're not shocked and you don't think you're the only one. Yeah. So, which I did when my husband was 55 years old. He was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is MCI, and it's considered an earlier than expected decline in memory and some things like that. It's a very vague sort of thing. It's kind of like you're having a problem. They can't really fit it into one of the other many diagnoses under that dementia umbrella, but it's not what you should be doing at that age. No. That's kind of an easy way to explain it. It's none of us need to panic when like the other day, I went to the pantry, stood there. I had no clue. I went back to the kitchen, that's what I was looking for. Went back to the pantry and found it. It's, as they say, I've heard said for things like Alzheimer's, it's when you have your car keys and you don't know what they're for, not when you forget where you put them. So this is sort of along those lines. My husband and our son and two other adults were out scouting locations for our son's Eagle Scout project. And they were really down the street from our house. They were actually at our son's junior high school. And as they started to drive home, my husband made a left turn at a place he should have gone straight and then made a right turn. So there was no left turn involved really at that point. And thankfully, our son said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And, oh, I didn't know where I was. Okay, no problem. And so they came home, and my son actually hates this part of the story, but I tell him he's the hero because he's the one who brought to light that there was a problem and said, "Dad got lost on the way home." And it was October 11th, 2009, because it was my 49th birthday. And I was like, hey, no big deal. I mean, I've been in the car and been listening to the radio, talking to a friend, whatever, and missed that freeway off ramp because I wasn't focused. And my husband said, "No, that's not what it was. I didn't know where I was." It's like, well, that's weird. I mean, that is kind of weird, right? So it's not like he was in a new spot. So, I just said, "Oh, okay, no problem." I did not think anything of it. I'll be honest. I am not the hero in the story. Just want to tell you that. So it's okay. You can look at me and say, "Terrible woman." So I had said, "Hey, next time you go to the doctor, we should talk to him about this." And I'll be honest. So it was, like I said, it was October and my husband's birthday's in June. And I was thinking next time being his annual physical, which, you tend to schedule around your birthday. So I was thinking June. So imagine my surprise when he calls a couple of days later from work and says, "Hey, can you get me in to see the doctor?" And I said, "Is this about that memory thing?" And he said, "Yeah." And I was like, okay, whatever. So I scheduled him an appointment and he came home and we were with an HMO. And that is an important part of the story because I think we all know that HMOs, the process is a little bit more unwieldy and you have to jump through hoops to get things done. Yes. So he came home and it was a Wednesday and he said, and I had actually also one more thing, I used to work for this company. So I knew like where they had equipment. And he came home and said, okay, I need to be at this office at 8 o'clock on Friday for an MCI. And I thought, well, first of all, they don't have or an MRI, sorry. I thought they don't have an MRI there. But I called and I thought, and if you're getting an MRI in 2 days, you're dying. What the heck is going on, right? I mean, that would be highly unusual in an HMO. So I called and they said, he's not having an MRI. He's seeing a neurologist. I said, no, my husband said he's having an MRI. He's having an MRI. And they said, he's not having an MRI. He's seeing a doctor. He might have one in the future. And I thought, oh, I need to go to this appointment with him. So I called a friend to pick up my son on the way to taking her daughter to school and went with my husband to that appointment where this very nice doctor who still carried a little black bag, it was really good though, said, oh, okay, so here, we're going to put you through some tests, blah, 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 blah. And it's going to take quite a while. You know, in a few weeks, you'll probably hear something and then we'll have you come back in after you have all the test results, whenever that is, basically, you know, because you don't know how long it'll take. And the drive home was 30-ish minutes. And by the time we got home, there were 2 messages on the answering machine scheduling 2 of the tests already. So we were at a very fast clip. And I know I really am thankful because I have met other people who it took them years to get a diagnosis, especially when they were young, because it's like, you don't have that. You couldn't have a memory issue. So if you're the caregiver or the spouse of someone who seems to have a problem, keep pushing to get what you think needs to be done. You know your spouse better than anyone else, first of all, better than the doctors. The doctors have that education, but you know them. So you know if something's not right. So he went through all these tests. I joked that he had just about everything except a colonoscopy done. So it was everything. And at the beginning of December of that same year, 2009, we sat in the same doctor's office. And he said, oh, okay, so you have mild cognitive impairment. It may or may not progress to Alzheimer's. Don't forget to pick up your prescriptions and we'll see you in February. Merry Christmas. And I thought, you said Alzheimer's. My brain went, what the heck? He's totally wrong. My husband's 55. Whoever heard of that before? And so we went home and we actually didn't speak for probably, remember I told you it was about a 30-minute drive? We didn't speak for 25 minutes. And it wasn't because we were mad. And I finally just said, mild. He said mild. Colds are mild. How bad can this be? You know, so we got home and my husband had been doing a lot of napping around this time. And so he went and took a nap and I went on the computer and I'm like, what mild? Because I thought, I know what mild means. I know what cognitive means. I know what impairment means. And I'm an intelligent woman. And I thought, I don't know what those 3 words strung together mean. And I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like what it's telling me here. This is not good. So I connected with our local Alzheimer's group, which is Alzheimer's Orange County, and saw this. I thought, oh, they have classes. I am really good at taking classes. And they had a class that was like for you and the loved one with the diagnosis. And I emailed them and started what I realized much later was kind of my plea to make somebody understand why this was wrong. I was like, my husband's 55, I'm 49, and we have a son in junior high school. And to me, I have just told you 3 things that should obviously add up to the fact that this is not correct.
Yeah.
Little did I know. So we started going to these classes and they were very good. You'd start out, say like you and I are together, and then they'd split us into 2 separate groups, one for the caregiver and one for the person with the diagnosis. So for the caregivers, well, the first day I burst into tears. It was great. And then, but it was very useful. And they give you this big fat book that had way too much information and was completely overwhelming because it's everything from, hey, you're here now to, okay, so when you have to put them in a facility, I was like, oh my God, you're going from, I have a normal life to, no, I don't anymore. And one day, and my husband kept saying, I don't belong there. I don't belong there. I'm not part of these people. I'm not like them. So one day after the end of the class, the facilitator said, I need to talk to the 2 of you. Oh, okay. And I thought, she's going to tell us we don't belong here and we've been in the wrong spot all this time. And instead she looks at my husband. It was like a comedy routine. I'm just going to tell you that. So feel free to laugh. And she says to him, you're depressed. And I said, you're depressed. And he said, I'm depressed. And she said, you're depressed. And I said, you're depressed. And he said, I'm depressed. And we just kept saying the same thing. And she's like, he's depressed. You need to, get some help for him the next time you take him to the doctor. I'm like, I literally said, okay, where's the closest hospital? I missed this the last time. I missed getting him diagnosed. I mean, I didn't know he was having a memory problem. So where's the closest hospital? I will take him to the emergency room. And she's like, no, no, just contact the doctor, make an appointment, you know. And what was interesting is back to saying, advocate for your loved one. And if you feel something isn't right, keep talking about it to people, because every single time we go to the doctor's office, and there were a lot of times, you know, from the diagnosis to this point, even, I would say, my husband lost the sparkle in his eye. And there's nothing else I could tell them. All I could say is, he doesn't look right. The sparkle is gone. And I know that sounded like it made no sense. And when the day they said, oh, he's depressed, I thought, that's it. That's what I've been trying to say, I guess, with saying. But to me, it was like what I could see was that sparkle, that life in his eyes wasn't there anymore. And so that the week that we got that diagnosis, then they said, okay, so get him into a therapist. So I called the insurance company and said, you have to get me something in walking distance. I said, it's Thursday. We've already had 7 appointments this week.
Yeah.
So they did, you know, and so after he was able to get himself there after like the first time, but it was just like, I can't keep doing this. And I was a stay-at-home mom. This was about the time I would have chosen to go back to work. Well, actually 2 years prior would have been, but 2 years prior, my mom died unexpectedly. My dad came and moved in with us, and he had just passed away in September of this same year where all of this starts to happen. And someone said to me after my husband was diagnosed, well, obviously you need to get a job. It's amazing what other people think is their business. And I looked at them and I said, oh, well, thank you. When you find an employer that will give me a full-time job, when this week alone it's Thursday and I've had to miss, you know, to take my husband to 7 appointments, we can talk. You know, because it's like, well, it's not going to happen. So that was a very long answer, and I may have missed the mark entirely. So feel free to ask any other questions.
No, it's interesting because, you know, I think people don't realize how traumatic it is, you know, when you get a diagnosis early.
Yeah,
You know, because it's so unexpected. You know, I tell clients all the time, getting old is not for sissies, you know. So
it's true.
you know, there's going to be some ups and downs and things like that, you know. So we just do the best we can with whatever, you know, life kind of throws at us, and we just kind of
Yeah.
work our way through the process, you know. So you know, so no, it I can appreciate you telling that story, and as much as I chuckled through it, you
You know,
know,
it's
I felt your
okay.
pain, you know, because so many people were just like you know. I have clients that have come into the office and they've had that early diagnosis and they're like, I don't get it, you know. And so, and I do appreciate the one thing you said about the keys, because my son called me about a week ago and said, Mom, why is your iPad in the pantry? And I didn't miss a beat, and I said, well, because I set it down to get the dog's bones before I left to go to work, and evidently I just left it there and shut the door and walked away, you know. So that's why it's there. Perfectly good
Yeah.
reason. And
I
so
have found my coffee cup in the linen closet because I had it with me. And then I
mhm,
set it down to grab sheets and couldn't hold it all, and
yes.
then closed it up. And later I'm like, wonder where, oh, I know where that is. Yeah.
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 And so yeah, fun stuff. And so yeah, I did that with my phone, oh gosh, years ago, at the office. Opened the refrigerator,
Oh.
said, oh, nobody filled up the drinks, right? So I set my phone down on the thing to the drinks, and then I spent 2 hours looking for my phone. People were calling it, you know, and then one of the staff, one of my team members found it. Oh my God, they made fun of me forever. You know, so I was really appreciate the key thing because it makes me feel better, you know. So for being,
Yeah.
you know, just sometimes things, you know, I'm busy, my brain's always working. And so, you know, but a lot of times it's very hard for spouses to accept help, you know. So no matter what the diagnosis, you know, why is
Yeah.
that? And how did your husband handle that?
Well, so do you mean how did he accept help or how did I accept help? Or both?
No, let's go with one you think is the most interesting today.
Well, I think I'll go with me, the caregiver. I think it's extremely difficult because we think we can do it all,
Hmm.
and we don't
Yeah.
always realize our limitations. And I will say, I've noticed, and I'm going to bet you have too, but especially in the caregiver world, there's been a lot of talk recently about the Gene Hackman situation.
Hmm.
And, you know, people approach it from a couple different, the horror of just the sadness of what happened. And that's like, I think, a caregiver's worst nightmare. But also, oh, well, why didn't she take care of herself? Well, first of all, none of us are ever going to know the true story and what happened.
Yeah.
But let's say because you keep pushing and you're taking care of that other person, and people will say, oh, I hope. I'm like, no, I don't have time to get sick. So that is not going to happen. And that is my attitude. No, I can't. It just can't, on a day where I'm felled by a bad headache or something. It's like, okay, that was not in my plan. That just did not happen. I could remember, in fact, as an example, my father was living with us, and this was before my husband was diagnosed, before my husband got lost nearby, because my dad was alive, my husband was working, and I had a terrible migraine one day. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And we have a 2-story house, and he pretty much stayed downstairs. I was upstairs in my bedroom. I mean, I was like bad migraine, like laying on the floor, bad. And yet, I didn't tell my father why. He had them. What did I think he was going to do? And when it got to be lunchtime, because he did expect his meals at a certain time, I made sure to get down the stairs to fix him lunch and then go back upstairs and lay on the floor some more. And even at that point, I thought, this is really stupid. But I did it, and we just push and push and push. And we feel like, if I don't do it, who will? And the problem is, when something comes up and you're in that position where you really do need help, like maybe someone from the outside, generally, and speaking for myself, you haven't put something in place. You haven't put in place that, oh, here's a caregiving company. I've already talked to them. They'll come in and do these minor things. I am very fortunate because my husband is still at the MCI level after 15 years. Good. Yes, there has been some decline, but nothing dramatic. But, we talked about the Gene Hackman situation, he and I, and first of all, he was shocked because he's like, that could happen to me, about himself. He said, you mean I might get to the point where I wouldn't know you were dead in the house, or what I was supposed to do? And I said, it's possible. It's possible for someone with a diagnosis. Yes, you're not there, don't worry. And that was a shock to him. So he didn't, because he didn't think about that. But it's also, these things that you don't have in place, that you don't think about in advance. Like, I've been talking to people recently and just saying, hey, do you have someone you check in with every day? Is there someone who's going to know that you didn't get up this morning? And amazingly, and these are people who maybe are widows, or they're married, but their spouse is like mine, cognitively impaired, or I have a friend with adult sons on the autism spectrum. And I just had this conversation with her yesterday. I said, so something happened. So who are you in touch with every morning? And I was 100% sure she was going to say one of her 2 sisters. And she said, well, me? And I'm like, yeah, you, who are you in touch with each morning? Well, my son would know. I'm like, who are you in touch with outside your house? Well, should I be? I said, yes. Okay, so we're going to start texting each other every morning just to say good morning. We're just going to say good morning and make sure, you can check on me that way too. And she's like, oh, okay, I could do that. And sometimes, you have to help someone else, you have to turn it back onto yourself. And I'm fortunate. So now she's going to check on me. I have another neighbor who's going to be 81, and we exchange Wordle scores every morning. And so by 8 o'clock, you don't have to have Wordle done, but you check in. And I also told my son the other day, hey, if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, which would be extremely unusual, even though he's an adult, check with a neighbor, just make sure everything's okay. Oh, okay. I just think there's so many things that you don't want to admit it. You don't want to think you can't do it. You don't want to think you can't take care of your loved one. But one of the challenges is, if it's your spouse, you had everything you were doing before. You have responsibilities in the home. You go to work. You stock the refrigerator. You check the pantry. You might do the grocery shopping, or you make the grocery list. But we all have things we do at home. And then maybe our spouse, if we have a spouse, does other things. We take half, they take half. Now you have all of it. You have the whole pile of stuff too. And that is just overwhelming. The thing that pushed me over the limit for years was, as funny as this sounds, mowing the lawn. I hated mowing the lawn. And my husband really couldn't do it. It tired him out. So I would wait until he went to like his Kiwanis meeting to do it, except I hated it. And then I would start crying. So I would mow the lawn and I'd be crying. And I always thought that the funniest thing was I felt like all the men in the neighborhood who had their garage doors open, when they saw me out there with the lawnmower, it's amazing how their garage doors all closed. And I would say to my son, dear, if there's a woman in your neighborhood who's single or her husband's ill, please go offer to mow that darn lawn. I said, we live in the suburbs, just offer to do it for her. So actually, finally, I broke down and told my husband, I hired a gardener to edge the lawn because that was what I really couldn't do. But I thought my husband was pretty strong-willed and would say, no, I'll do it, because that was generally what kept happening. And this time he said, no, hire him to do the whole thing. So we have a gardener twice a month and life got better. But what's hard is, as I would sit in a lot of different meetings for people who were the caregiver, and you'd say, I have a hard time doing, let's say, the housework. Well, hire someone. Well, I have a hard time doing the yard work. Well, hire someone. Well, I have a hard time hire someone. I don't know about any other caregiver out there, but when my husband was diagnosed, the dump truck full of money did not show up.
Yeah.
So you're still trying to balance all of these things. Oh, and a loss of income, because my husband had been working, and his employer, once he got the diagnosis, was very nice about it and did really with the only thing it could do, which was say, we're so sorry, you're out on disability now.
Yeah.
So for a year, they had to call every month to say, can you come back to work yet? And I just dreaded those phone calls, because sometimes I would be so sweet and say no, and sometimes it'd be like, well, did you come up with a diagnosis or a solution? Did you come up with a cure? Well, then he's not coming back. So
Definitely
after
hard.
a year, he was no longer working. But fortunately, when he had started with his employer, they had said, you need to get long-term disability. So that held us over for quite a while. So that was nice.
Good. All right. I hate to do this to you, Gincy. This has been great. So I'm going to have you back to finish our conversation. But for those that have enjoyed this as much as I have, how do they find you?
Well, you can find me at my personal website, which is Gincy Heins, and that's spelled Ginc as in cat, Heins as in Sam.com. Or you can find me on the 365 caregivingtips.com website. That one's nice and easy. Or you can also email me, because I'm happy to help you. Or if you need some assistance in your area, you can definitely reach out to me and I'd love to help you. And that's Gincy, Ginc as in cat, at 365caregivingtips.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much, girl. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Likewise, thank you.
I look forward to having you on again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.